Good morning, everyone. It'll just be a few minutes before we get started. Okay. Okay. It's 9:04. Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Welcome to the 18th installment of my weekly virtual office hour address. And, people say that they really appreciate this time, and from my standpoint, it's actually very useful to give everyone an update as we kind of go through this on an ongoing basis. I just want to um, say that a lot of people have been giving me feedback lately, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback that people appreciate this, and it allows me a chance to give you some updates, answer some questions, and then just provide some general words of encouragement, to our Sunnyvale residents and actually people outside of our city that are watching this. So just I want to thank you for allowing me to continue to represent you, to work for Sunnyvale during these difficult but extraordinary times. And I hope everyone's doing well, staying healthy. This it's really important that everyone's taking care of themselves and doing whatever you can to protect yourself and make sure that you're healthy both physically and mentally. So keep following the county health orders. Remember that you need to do whatever you can to stop the spread of the virus. Particularly washing your hands, getting into that habit of whenever you come home, wash your hands, wash your mask, don't touch your face, maintain safe social distancing when you're out, only go out for essential items, reduce the number of people that you come in contact with, and of course, wear your mask. It really helps, and of course, it's mandatory from a state standpoint. You know, as I keep saying, it's like if you need a face covering, please contact me. And especially if you're only using disposable face coverings, uh, make try to find a reusable one. You know, getting into that habit of washing your hands and washing your mask is really important, and it reduces, as opposed to having tons of disposables, which are needed in, we'll say, a hospital setting. Uh, these are critical for people to have every day, and you keep using the same mask and have a spare. I still have people reaching out, so I have more masks. If you need a mask, if a neighbor needs a mask, have them reach out to me. We're not out of the woods yet. You know, you can be a carrier, or somebody that you know can be a carrier and not have any symptoms. So please be careful when interacting with anyone, and how you expand that bubble. So you know, it's really critical. And as we see the numbers go up around the state as far as the number of COVID-19 cases, it's really important to stop that spread. So we are now 122 days after the March 16th shelter-in-place order went in place, and that's 1/3 of a year. So we are now exactly 1/3 of a year has been spent sheltering in place. I didn't, no big fanfare, but it is a a big milestone from that standpoint, because we've now passed 1/3 of the year where people have been sheltering in place, maintaining safe social distancing, and I don't see any end to that anytime soon. So, it's the new normal, and trying to figure out how we move forward after this is really important. So, a lot keeps happening every day. I have press conferences to watch. I have, conference calls, and to help advocate, to educate, to figure out, what's happening around this county, around the state, around the nation. And of course, it's advocating for our city and trying to make sure that we're well represented at those levels is critical. So now let's go ahead and move to what's happened over the last week at a federal, a state, a county, and of course a city level. So first, last Tuesday at the county level, it was announced that, in an about face, the county had finally gotten their variance approved from a state standpoint. So this was critical for, the new order, and that new order basically moved from kind of a completely blanket shelter in place model, and in different stages, to more of a risk reduction model for our businesses. And, that order and that variance allowed a change that starting Monday, July 13th, after that approval from a state level, the new order would allow businesses like personal services, salons, barbershops, gyms to reopen, and then large groups to gather outside of up to 60 people with appropriate social distancing. And so that order was scheduled and did go into place on Monday morning at 12:01 a.m. And so, and this county still urged residents to make sure that you maintain that safe social distance. If you're over the age of 70, or have serious underlying medical conditions, you should stay at home. The order also required, strict social distancing when outside the home, depending upon what you're doing, for gatherings up to 60 people. And the order itself said indoor gatherings up to 20, but we'll be talking about that in a second. Gatherings and then face coverings, must meet the state guidelines as far as doing state guidelines. And then as far as businesses, telework, trying to get as many businesses as possible to follow remote work for their employees if they can. New social distancing requirements. So every business needs to submit new protocol requirements, so their new procedures at covid19prepare.org. So if businesses haven't done that yet, they should do that. And then capacity limitations, so no more than one worker every 250 square feet of that business, and then no more than one employee every 150 square feet of the public portion of that business. So that was the order that went in place for businesses. Of course, there are exceptions for healthcare and education and childcare, and then capacity limits don't apply for the public coming in to children under 12 when they're accompanying their parents. And then, of course, as far as a reporting standpoint, if any businesses find out that any of their employees have been exposed, they are legally required to inform public health within 4 hours of that worker being exposed. And so that new open starting Monday applied to personal services, hair salons, nail salons, massage therapy, nail salons, massage, gyms and fitness, construction, recreational and athletic, gatherings for social, economic, religious, cultural purposes, agricultural, hotels and motels, public transit, childcare, pools, outdoor dining, and food facilities. And then on Friday, and this is one of the things that I mentioned, that there was mandatory guidelines for all those kind of sub businesses depending upon what their type is. And on Friday, I had mentioned that in reading the Thursday night gathering mandate, so the mandatory strict guidelines that the county was putting forward, I read that indoor gatherings weren't allowed, although it wasn't made public news until about Friday afternoon or Friday sometime during the day. Dr. Cody had a press conference and released that yes, because of the uptick in numbers, they're not allowing basically indoor gatherings to occur. So that was an important thing. So that applied to religious and other gatherings that we're planning to start operation sometime this week. And so that was approved last Tuesday. And then on Sunday, I don't know how many of you attended. I had a conversation with the Palo Alto council members, Greg Tanaka and Liz Niss, about our Sunnyvale DPS model. And for those of you that don't understand, our public safety model, so our Department of Public Safety, DPS, is pretty unique that since 1950, so for 70 years, in 1950, the city manager basically proposed this merge model of fire, safety, police, and EMS all in one unit. And so basically every fireman's a policeman, every policeman's a fireman. And from that standpoint, it saves our city money. I learned, it's constantly always, I've loved the model because, a lot of departments are talking about reimagining what their police force looks like. And a lot of, in Palo Alto, after I had been talking to several council members there, is actually directed their staff to look at, our Sunnyvale's public safety model. And so, it was an interesting talk for about a half an hour, and I'll add it to my Facebook feed sometime soon, just so that people can go back and watch that. I put forth, some of the information about, what our spending is, what our head counts are, what the different portions of our department are, and answered a few questions. And from that presentation, also found out that from a Bay Area city standpoint, for cities over 75,000 people, we have the lowest per resident cost for our police department. So it is kind of an interesting thing from that standpoint, and so I'll put that information out there for those that are interested in it. But it was a great discussion. It was good to expound on how good our model is, and ultimately it educate other cities. And that's the whole thing, is from a city standpoint, you always try to copy the good ideas that other cities are doing. And I was very happy to see that Palo Alto is taking a very serious look at what we're doing here in Sunnyvale. Okay, and then on Monday, the new health order went into place. So hopefully, everybody got their hair cut, nails done, massage, had a slight vision of the way things used to be, before shelter in place. But at lunchtime on Monday, Governor Newsom had a press conference, and because of statewide increases in COVID-19, the number of hospitalizations, the number of cases, basically he turned down this dimmer switch. So part of the governor's control is figuring out allowing basically statewide things to open up, and then on a county by county basis, counties can make the decision on what they would like to do. That being said, because of the outbreaks around the state, the number of new cases and the number of people being hospitalized, he decided to basically dim down the operations for around the state. So indoor restaurants, wineries and tasting rooms, movie theaters, card rooms, family entertainment centers, zoos and museums, bars, breweries, and pubs, indoor and outdoor, had to close. And so that went into effect immediately around the state. So indoor operations for those things listed, and then of course bars, breweries, pubs couldn't have any operations at all. And so depending upon what had already been opened up on a county level, especially in Southern California, things were a lot more open. And then that basically turned that dimmer switch back quite a bit. And then Newsom also revealed in that press conference that Santa Clara and Alameda County were going to be added to the watch list later in the week. And so we weren't immediately affected, other than because we didn't have from the immediate shutdown. We didn't have movie theaters open, card rooms, zoos and museums, bars, breweries, pubs. But basically, the governor said that cities that were on the watch, or counties that were on the watch list, would have to reduce things quite a bit, like personal services, and stop the majority of what their indoor operations were. So that was basically a warning, and they had already been contacting the county at that point, saying, it's like, okay, I understand that you opened up Monday morning, but that being said, the county was going to have to shut back down on Wednesday. So the county health, issued its press release later that afternoon that as of 12 a.m. Wednesday morning, they would close, worship services, protest, fitness centers, offices in non-essential sectors, all personal care services, so hair salons, barbershops, nail salons, body waxing, tattoo parlors, and shopping malls. So all those immediately had to close. Or close as of Wednesday morning. So hopefully you got your hair cut, on Monday or Tuesday. You got your nails done. Definitely there were a lot of people that massage that you've been needing to deal with the stress of sheltering in place. That being said, it was difficult, and I've heard from a lot of businesses, it's like, how can we, flip-flop on this? Well, I was happy that we at least had opened up, because there were all these counties around us that people were actually driving to get their nails done, to get their hair done. And to me, it's like, appropriate measures can be put in place for wearing masks and doing these things safely. And that was an important thing, that, okay, we had a taste of, what it might be hopefully soon. But, right now, all those things closed down. And I really feel for all these businesses that prep their employees to open back up and then had to immediately shut down. So we'll see where that goes. Definitely from a hair salon standpoint, I saw that later this week the California State, I don't know what the name of the organization is, but basically the hair salon organization has requested the governor to allow outdoor hair cutting. And that's what a lot of people have been doing in their backyard. So my wife has cut my hair several times in the backyard, so it makes it easier for cleanup anyway, if nothing else. But that was important. So all that closed back down. As we keep monitoring and dealing with our numbers, definitely we'll see where things go, and hopefully they'll be opening back up sometime in the next week or two. But at least we have that variance now. So when the governor basically turns things back up, definitely we will hopefully be one of the ones that will immediately be opening those back up. One of the things that happened last Friday was in Alameda County is the state basically said that they had to close down all their outdoor dining because they had not gotten a variance. And that was one of the things that over July 4th weekend, I mentioned, ABC came and shut down all the outdoor restaurants in Gilroy and Morgan Hill. And one of the things that I did at that point was, when we finally got our variance, was contact several Fremont mayors and tell them that, Lily May in Fremont and several other mayors in Alameda County, that they need to make sure that their variance is in place. They started working on that and realized that the state basically issued an announcement on Friday that there were several counties around the state that had opened up outdoor seating but didn't have the appropriate variance. And so ultimately, Fremont and other Alameda cities had to close down outdoor seating this week. I think they closed it down on Monday, Sunday or Monday, because of they didn't have a state variant. So they're still working through that. But this is the whole communication across our county and between counties to try to figure out what's going on, what the state is doing, and trying to make sure that we're all following and doing whatever we can to make sure our businesses are opening up safely. And on Tuesday, Sunnyvale announced our next listening event. So in response to the ongoing, police calls for police reform and into racial injustice, the city's been doing a lot as far as trying to be more transparent and listening and examining our policies, our practices, and our programs. The Department of Public Safety released information on the use of force policies over the last month. It discontinued the use of the carotid control hold, and then just last week it released the 10 years of data on police-involved shootings in our city and what those incidents were and what the perpetrator was doing. And then they will, and they'll continue to release this data and information to help frame our conversation as we move forward. But the next stage of this, we had our first virtual meeting on June 25th, and we had about over 200 people that attended, that listened during the event, and a lot of watched that proceedings later. And then, of course, next week, so the announcement was next week, next Wednesday, July 22nd, from 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. We're holding our next virtual dialogue, and this will be a dialogue with Sunnyvale youth on public safety in schools. So this conversation is being done in partnership with Fremont Union High School District, Sunnyvale School District, and the students from our Youth Public Policy Institute. So Sunnyvale youth, interested community members are encouraged to participate, and so our city website has more information if you want to join. If you want to listen, it's very easy, but if you want to join in and have conversation, you definitely need to register, and the URL for that is sunnyvale.ca.gov/unity. So I encourage people to join in, not not only if you're students or are members of Fremont or Sunnyvale School District, but the other school districts that are here also. And so I've been passing that out to the other school districts. We want to hear, how our Sunnyvale, youth, how their interactions are with our public safety department. And then on Tuesday, so this is outside of our county for once. It's county related. The San Francisco Board of Supervisors declined to take up the proposed 1/8 cent sales tax funding for Caltrain. So this was an important thing. Caltrain officials proposed a 1/8 sales tax since 1/8 cent sales tax for San Francisco, San Mateo, and Santa Clara counties as a way to provide long-term funding to Caltrain. And Caltrain's been around for 160 years. It has some of the best fare box returns for any transportation organization in the county or in the country. Right now, it's pre-COVID. It was around 70%, and that's far better than BART, and especially far better than VTA, which is around 12%. So it was doing, from an operational standpoint, very well to basically manage costs and make sure that the people that are writing it is actually funding the majority of those operations. But they've had funding issues in the past, and making sure for the long-term viability, much like BART gets monies from its counties, the counties that it's going through. And even BART, announced that it expects to have a $970 million deficit over the next 3 years. So BART is having, even with its county funding and state funding and some, I think, federal funding it gets, has been having issues. So so I was very disheartened to see the San Francisco Board of Supervisors decided to not put that on the ballot in November. So all three Board of Supervisors from all three counties need to do it, as well as several organizations, so several other transportation organizations that need to approve this to make sure that it makes it on the ballot. The San Francisco Board of Supervisors will look at it again next week, and hopefully at that point, with enough public feedback that this is really important. This keeps a lot of traffic off of 101, between San Jose and San Francisco, and San Francisco and San Jose. And so it's really important from that standpoint, from a regional plan, to make sure that this is a viable option for all of our cities up and down the peninsula, the South Bay, and San Francisco itself. So hopefully, it polled well with voters. So people saw, people in the three counties saw that service is a very important part of operation, especially as you look at the long-term, operation and transportation up and down the peninsula. It's really important, and so it polled well. And I was sorry to hear that they at least turned it down on Tuesday night. Hopefully, they will change their mind next week, and we'll see where that goes. And then on Wednesday, as we talked about, personal services closed down again in Santa Clara County. So the request from hair salons will hopefully open things back up. But I've heard a lot of issues with trying to maintain operations. Governor Newsom on Wednesday announced that 30 counties are now on the state watch list, and that included Santa Clara County and Alameda County. And by the end of the day today, I think all Bay Area counties will be on the watch list. I think Mendocino County was one of the few that wasn't on there. But at this point, pretty much everything is shutting down and going to reduced operations as much as possible. And then on Thursday, Governor Newsom announced Project Home Key, and so this was a new plan. It basically, Project Home Key gave $600 million. That's right, $600 million fund for local governments to purchase housing for homeless Californians. And we're seeing an uptick of, even with some of the eviction moratoriums, we're still seeing, an uptick in homelessness. And so this is basically the largest, that would be the largest expansion of housing for homeless in recent history. And so that $600 million will be made available immediately to support the purchase and rehabilitation of buildings in order to convert them into permanent long-term housing. So we should start hearing more of that, but it's really to support that speedy implementation. Uh, so and Governor Newsom also signed some new legislation to provide exemptions from CEQA and some zoning compliance for converted hotels, motels, and other housing types under the home key funding. So we'll see where that goes, but definitely, I think that trying to find long-term housing for people that conceivably are hit by COVID is really important. And then today, this afternoon sometime, probably at his noon press conference, the governor is expected to announce new guidance for reopening schools. So, and districts, and it's most likely that there are already districts that have dropped plans to welcome back kids to the classroom in the fall. That being said, Hayward actually had, some of the Hayward schools have year-round operation, and they actually opened up today. But conceivably, there's a lot of school districts, and these are very difficult decisions by the school districts. I've sat through several school board meetings over the last few weeks, and it's very difficult because you have some parents who are wanting to get back to work and need to go to their job and can't deal with childcare and having their children at home, or their child doesn't work well with the remote learning concept. So needs that personal interaction with teachers, with someone to actually help them through education a lot more directly. Or you have the other parents that are only wanting to send children back to school if it can be 100% safe. And so there's this wide variety, of parents and youth that, and teachers that are, have issues. And, the governor's office didn't give any details. So we'll see at noon today where that is, of course, with the virus increasing significantly in some counties. There's a lot of pressure to forego in-class instruction for the beginning of the year, at least the fall, until conditions improve. And that would also, that would be welcome news to some parents, and especially some of the teachers I've heard from that have concerns about, returning to the classroom. So we'll see, what the governor announces today. I've sat through several board meetings. There's also been the state director of education has also given several meetings over the last few weeks. So we'll see where today's press conference goes. And then let's go ahead and go to the county dashboard numbers. From a testing standpoint, definitely the number of cases have increased over the last week. So our total number of cases are now for Santa Clara County are now 7,046. This is up 1,278 from last week. And we just had 100 new cases yesterday, but that's an ever increasing, number. So, it's 12, almost 1,300 cases since last week. The week before that, it was 1,000 cases. And the week before that, it's 900. So you can kind of see a steady progression and steady increase as far as the number of cases that, 900, 1,000, 1,278. So on a weekly basis, it's going up from a county standpoint. So far, we've had, 176 deaths within the county. And so that's 10 more deaths in the last week. And we currently have 80 people hospitalized. So there's you know, all these numbers have kind of ticked up in the last few weeks. San Jose itself has had 4,598 cases. It's up 916 since last week, and that's previous week it was up 600 cases. So it went from 600 to plus 900, plus 600 to plus 900. So it's dramatically increased over the last week. And then Sunnyvale, we're at 358 cases. That's 53 since last week, and that's actually down since the week before when we had 59 cases. So we're still having, it might have leveled off a little bit, but we still have an increasing number of cases within our city also. And testing continues to improve. Lots more pop-ups are occurring, and we're trying to get pop-up locations back into Sunnyvale. El Camino Healthcare is also trying to do a pop-up, and so there's been a lot going on from that standpoint. But there's lots of efforts to make sure that we have appropriate tracing, and tracing seems to be okay right now. We've got nearly, I think, 900 people that have gone through the tracing effort, because as people get exposed, you need to continue to monitor who they, and figure out who they've been exposed to. So that whole tracing effort is actually very critical as we see more and more people test positive, and tracking down the people they've been in contact with and making sure that they get tested also. Okay, so let's go ahead and move to our weekly questions. And before we get to the actual questions, first I just want to have a request for nominations. So if you know someone who in Sunnyvale who's done an outstanding job in the last year, and should be recognized, this is your chance to submit a nomination there for our Sunnyvale Community Awards. So our yearly Sunnyvale Community Awards recognize individuals who are really making a difference in our community. And so there's different categories: Distinguished Resident of the Year, Educator of the Year, High School Student of the Year, Business of the Year, and then Contribution to the Arts and Environmental Achievement. So you can go visit the Sunnyvale website for more information. You can search on Community Awards. The deadline is July 26th. So you have another few days. So you have a little bit of time, over a week to actually do that application. But it's important, this is really, it's a chance to highlight, and we're not really sure how those awards will be given. They're normally given at the State of the City every year. And we're still finalizing what that's going to look like. Is it fully virtual? Is it a hybrid virtual and some awards being presented? So we'll see where things go as far as that's concerned. But it's really important that we highlight and take a step back and look at the good that people are doing in our community, and recognizing the efforts that people do on a daily basis to make our city a better city. So just wanted to put that out there. So I've heard this from multiple people. What's happening with downtown? So I mentioned a little bit of this last week, but I wanted to bring it up again. We need your input. There are several public hearings in July and August, and on the downtown. And as a quick reminder, council had basically approved this effort for the new downtown specific plan, because there were several projects that were asking for changes in office space and retail, in housing in the downtown area. And so Planning Commission and Council and several other commissions, BPAC, Sustainability Commission, will all have different reviews of that downtown specific plan. And so it's the downtown parking policies, it's the update to the downtown specific plan, zoning and EIR, it's a downtown agreement with basically the City Line project, and it's also the development agreement with the old post office site. So all those plans are out there and they'll be reviewed at the BPAC, the Bicycle Pedestrian and Advocacy Commission, on Thursday, July 16th, Sustainability Commission on Monday, July 20th, the Heritage Preservation Commission on Wednesday, July 22nd, and the Planning Commission on July 27th, and finally a special council meeting on Tuesday, August 11th. So that's, those plans, those documents are out on the city website for review. You can go to the Sunnyvale website and search for DSP, downtown specific plan, and that will give you a link to all those. And then, also at that August 11th meeting where we're going through those plans, we will also, council will also be reviewing the conceptual design for Plaza del Sol Phase 2. So across the plaza that's across from the Caltrain station has had a lot of community outreach. And so, from that standpoint, we're looking to get final direction, and there's been community outreach. I haven't seen the final plans. I think they might be online now, but in order to figure out, what people wanted there. So there's a series of community meetings before shelter in place where people could give their feedback of what they'd like to see, and staff and people did online comments, and so staff has now kind of collected all that and are putting forth what their vision is for phase 2 of the Plaza del Sol. So that's happening downtown also. And then, restaurants are still opening. So next Wednesday, July 22nd, and I'll put something on here later, Sweet Sicily will be opening in downtown. So this will be in the location of Il Postale along Murphy Avenue. So Joe Antuzzi retired and basically sold Il Postale to another group that was managing it. They decided with the shelter in place issues that they can't really run a restaurant. And I've heard that from certain restaurants that will not be reopening. And so Sweet Sicily, which is actually a restaurant in Gilroy, doing very well in Gilroy, has basically decided to open up in Sunnyvale in the middle of the shelter in place, and I applaud them for that. They've reached out, and I was happy to see that they're mixture of Italian food as well as baked goods. So we'll have a little bakery downtown as well as just Italian food. So it'll be interesting, and it's the owners actually moved to the U.S. from Palermo, from Sicily, 5 years ago. So it'll be good to see what their food is, and I touch base with council members in Gilroy, and they love it. So it'll be good to have another new restaurant downtown, and there are several new restaurants that are opening up within our city during these times. So I applaud them for pushing forward with their plans, and looking forward to having a new restaurant to try. Let's see. Last week, one of the questions was, what can we vote in November to bring fiber internet to Sunnyvale faster? And one of the things that came out of that was several people replied that there are fiber services within the city, depending upon what your carrier is. So definitely, if you're interested in fiber, contact your carrier or contact one of the ones listed there. So if you go back to the comments from last week, definitely there were several people that said that they actually had fiber. One of the questions I had was, I was wondering if you knew where a Sunnyvale resident can be tested in the area. Does it cost anything? I'm asking for one of my neighbors. If you need to find a location to get tested, please visit www.sccfreetest.org. So sccfreetest.org gives all the locations within the county, and so there are pop-up locations that move around. There are also the hospitals, and specifically for us, El Camino Hospital is providing free COVID-19 tests by appointment for everyone in the El Camino Healthcare District. And then Planned Parenthood in Mountain View is also doing tests by appointment, and I think those are also free. If you have insurance, of course, you can always go to your hospital that's covered by under your health care, and they should be able to provide and are required to provide a COVID-19 test regardless of whether or not you are symptomatic. So that's important. One of the questions I got was what's happening with Maud Avenue and the new bike lanes. And so for those people that have driven through Maud, you know that that's been somewhat reconfigured over the last few months. In 2015 and early in 2016, Sunnyvale City Council, and this was before I was on City Council, but I went to several of the outreach meetings, decided that they're going to basically remove the on-street parking along Maud and put in bike lanes. And so they did those changes. They did a slurry seal of all of Maud when they restriped it. They put in bike lanes. However, they didn't immediately put in the no parking signs. So there are a lot of people that were still parking along Maud on the bike lanes. The no parking signs went in this week, and they will officially start being monitored next week. So starting, I think, Monday, that people will be warned and ticketed. So that there's a whole process there to try to make sure that people understand that there is no parking along Maud now where there's those bike lanes. And there'll be a 6-month evaluation to see how that's working, how bad the parking in the surrounding neighborhoods has gotten. It will be one of the questions. This has been an ongoing issue, or a question about there's several apartment complexes there that basically have one parking spot per unit, and they have multiple cars per unit, and so a lot of those were parking along Maud Avenue, and so we'll see how bad the parking situation goes and whether or not there are other changes. There were several other options that when it went to council were evaluated. That being said, it was decided that basically making dedicated bike lanes was the decision at that point. One of the questions I got was, when will the Fremont pool open? And so we talked about this previously. Finally on Monday, so just this past Monday, council. So after 18 years, the California Sports Center decided that they couldn't operate the Sunnyvale Swim Complex at Fremont High School anymore. And this was a partnership between Fremont Union High School and the city of Sunnyvale that they had. So when they terminated that contract, we had to figure out how to kind of revive it from a city standpoint. And so the city finalized its operational plan. I mentioned that 2 weeks ago. They put an online reservation system in place last week. And then starting on Monday, we started having lap swim in the morning from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. and in the evening, early evening, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. And I've heard that things are doing well. It's been really well booked in the mornings. There's been a few open spots in the afternoons, but it's just been a positive feedback from our residents who've been really wanting to basically get back in the pool. And appointment scheduling is done online. So if you go to sunnyvale.ca.gov and search for pools, you can actually find it there. But you book an appointment, and then you basically purchase a swim pass, and you have your 45-minute window to use that lane. So hopefully that works out, and we can expand those hours as the summer progresses. Things. And this was the thing we wanted to see how popular it would be, and it's city staff spending their time to monitor the operation of the pool. So it's making sure that that's going well. One of the questions I got is, can you help us foodies get a food truck in Sunnyvale called Waffle Amore? So I'll put a link into the comments. I've been adding food trucks to my visits. So I'm now at 115 or 16 different restaurants or food trucks within our city. And so whatever I can do to help support small businesses, that's really important. And so, definitely if we can get enough, supposedly if they can get 50 neighbors to sign up that they want to try the food truck, they'll show up somewhere here in Sunnyvale. So we'll see how that goes. Uh, and one of the questions I got is, may I ask which voice you're hearing in majority of the class versus online education? I've heard, it's mixed. I would say probably the majority are people that are really worried about sending their kids back to school and want to do, remote distancing. That being said, it's making sure that those families that have issues or they want to do remote learning. That being said, the families that are having remote learning issues are very vociferous in the opposite way. And I would say it's probably maybe 2/3 that want to do remote learning, and maybe the third that want to get their kids back in school. And there are several plans that were put forth by like Sunnyvale School District that had kind of a hybrid plan of okay, kids can go Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday in different weeks and do remote learning. So there's different kind of hybrid plans, completely remote learning. I've heard that several school board members might be more interested in doing that, at least in the short term. And depending upon what the governor says today, that might be the plan for all schools come the beginning of the new school year. Are the patients hospitalized all from our county, or is this a mix of county plus other counties? So we've had a few people that were definitely moved to our county, so from a hospitalization standpoint, but the majority of them are from our county. So what's the status of Whole Foods and AMC? So AMC said that they're ready to go back and open up, and they had a plan, I think, about a month ago. That being said, of course, the governor has said no movie theaters will be open. So I haven't heard from AMC recently on what their plans are. Their facility is completely done internally, and so that's ready to open. And from a operational standpoint, it's when people feel safe when the county opens up actually indoor movie theaters. So that's just pending at this point, and when they're ready to try to get people to come back. And then Whole Foods itself, Whole Foods is still working on the interior of their building, and so hopefully, plan was for September, late September, sometime maybe October. We'll see where that goes. I haven't had an update on that recently, so hopefully that goes well. Any comment on the 4 days of 3 deaths day each? Don't know what that is. Any plans for Turmeric to reopen or something new to take over its location? Yeah, I've actually asked city staff about that. Currently, there are no plans that I've seen or that they've heard about of anybody wanting to take that place. So we're not really sure. And this is the whole thing. There's been multiple locations, Country Gourmet being one. There's several locations around, several restaurants around the city that have not shown anything as far as wanting to reopen, and not sure that they'll ever reopen. So we'll see. Depending upon what the restaurants are. A lot of them are now trying to reopen and trying to get business back. So definitely, whatever you can do to support those businesses, it's really good. Let's see. Anything else? I think that's it for the week. We're actually a little bit shorter this week as far. Oh wait, there's at least one question. What was it? Oh yeah, I got several questions about graffiti. So there's been several spots for graffiti. If you go to Sunnyvale Access, so at the front of every web page for the city. So sunnyvale.ca.gov, you'll see a Sunnyvale Access link. If you click there, there's a place to report graffiti. And so when you report the address, what happens is neighborhood preservation will then contact that property owner and basically inform them that they need to ultimately paint over, remove that graffiti however they can as quickly as possible. So definitely, that's been an ongoing question. I have seen myself on several of my runs this week, trying to make sure that ultimately the people have tagged certain locations in the city. And so I come back from my run, I go to sunnyvale.ca.gov and hit the Sunnyvale Access button and have reported that. And that's Sunnyvale Access is very important, especially if you have, cracked sidewalks. And I've seen, sidewalk repairs, replacements going on right now. If you see cracks in your sidewalk, if you see, traffic lights out, this is where you go to report, any of the issues that you're seeing within the city. So definitely I encourage you to do that. Staff will follow up, whatever the problems are. Okay. And let's see. And one last reminder, be careful of scams. It is between scams around COVID and of course, this week our taxes were due. So scams around tax season, there's a lot of scams going on, people sheltering in place and being, contacted over the phone or by email about, COVID testing or you hear scams about people that are trying to find new places. And because of COVID testing, they've given people deposits and then find out that they can't actually move into the place. Whoever they gave the deposit to didn't actually own that place. So lots of issues. Be careful of scams. So it's about 10 a.m. Let's go ahead and wrap up. Thanks again for joining me this week. As a reminder, next week, I will start this live stream at 8:30 a.m. So it'll be a little bit earlier as opposed to 9 a.m. I have a 10 a.m. commitment. So, it'll be a little, we'll see if the crowd is an early morning crowd or whether or not most people join at 9 a.m. as usual, or how many people actually stay to the end of the meeting. I continue to be proud of Sunnyvale, and the response to the pandemic. Help your neighbors, make and share masks, share homemade baked goods, and plant seedlings. Continue to build our community, especially during these difficult times. I'm proud to see Sunnyvale residents pulling together to help their neighbors and strangers however they can. If you're out on a walk, wave, say hello, from a safe social distance. People miss that social interaction. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together. We'll get through this together. Thanks for listening. And until next week, have a safe week. Wear your mask, stay safe, take care. Bye.